So looking at ACIF and having the validation API, what does ACIF enable and bring to the market for your customers? Uh, go around the board. But Martin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. I think from ClearCast side, we're constantly being approached by SSPs, brands about being able to access more of this validation compliance data and metadata through APIs. And this validation API will works for this. It's we're fully supportive of this, and we think it has massive benefits to our customers. Being able to receive real-time event-driven validation data is key. Whether these clock numbers have been approved or not. Um, also being able to surface clearance compliance data to users based on kind of tiered models, see tiered subscription models that we could apply through this. And I suppose the last thing is kind of standardizing processes, ensuring kind of more transparency and efficiency across all these different platforms is critical. Thank you.
Okay, great. Muhammad, is there any additional features that are brought to the market, particularly for your customer base?
Oh, yes, in our perspective, we think that the ecosystem of advertising technologies is really fragmented. So we think that this new ACIF Creative ID framework, uh, implemented worldwide by you guys, is a real opportunity for video advertising, CTV and TV in many ways. First of all, we talk about the global traceability. Um, on the national market, we built up this experience over nearly 15 years on unambiguous identification of creative and essential metadata managed centrally, kept up to date centrally. But with ACIF, what is new is that this uniqueness is now managed worldwide, globally, and it's a real advance. It's an important element of the framework, is the distinction between an advertising registry's ID and identifies issues by other registries. So, other registries. So each issued identifier must be unique within the registry, and to avoid duplication with other registries, there is something very interesting is the root domain. So the combination of the root domain and the registries make it globally unique, and these two pieces of information represent the universal ad ID that can be placed in the vast for of the tech lab. So it's really interesting about the global traceability. The second reason is that there is as Martin said, an open validation API. So any actor of the value chain can validate an identifier, whether it exists or not. At the demo showed us JSON and retrieve the associated metadata. So the ACIF Validation API automates validation, enabling an open ecosystem in which multiple ad registries can interoperate rather than relying on a proprietary API semantics and metadata schemas. So it's now globally standardized, and this is a real advantage. The third reason is the automated decision making. It's one of the key benefits of ad registration is that it enables assigned unique identifiers to be automated and all for decision making such as measurement, frequency capping, separation from competition. If it fits with the brand's issues and the brand safety, and also about the creative reconciliation. Speaking about the creative reconciliation, the registration of an advertisement generates an identifier for each basic advertising creation. So as far as we're concerned, we'll propose a hierarchy of issuing sub-identifiers for various complementary creations within a campaign. And what it is interesting with the spec that have been published, the relationships between two or more IDs will be expressed to indicate the parent-child association. So this will be done with the specified relationships objects, and it enables it enables ID graphs to be established that promote discovery and interoperability. So this is really interesting. And the fact that if you have an ad that, regardless of where the ad is shown, can be on linear, CTV, web, and social channels, we use the same ID for all video transcoding. So we ensure that data from various sources can be aligned to the same creative message. So this is the main advantage that we see. So all these advances offers finally the good conditions to provide the unification needed for market growth and to work towards a more efficient ecosystem. And at the national level, we work with the whole industry. We're lucky enough to have the support of the Alliance Digitale, uh, several organizations such as PDI and also advertisers, sales house, agencies, and so on. So we're moving forward for bringing this more efficient ecosystem. So thank you for this protocol. Very interesting.
No, that is excellent. He went through, and gave great explanation on all of the benefits. Jason, is there any that they missed, or is there any
No,
particular
I think
benefit
I
that
think
your
they
customers are really looking forward to?
yeah, I think they hit a lot of it. I think that the part that I like in terms of just from our own version of ACIF, like we really eventually want to migrate our existing validation API that we have over to ACIF completely, like getting our clients over because it's much more straightforward too. Again, we were doing things kind of in a silo from the US perspective, but to Mohammed's point and Martin's point about how do we connect, right? Like this is really global, and we saw a question in Q&A about like who's calling us, SSPs, DSPs, everything. When we went through this process, we were realizing yes. The answer is yes. Like every part of the chain is calling us, and I think simplifying it down, being able to do it in near real time, and I have a programmatic background from about 10 years ago to just a couple years ago too, knowing how key that is to be able to respond as quickly as possible. And that's where I challenged our team to make as fast of an API response as possible. And so we're continuing to do that. Some of the work that we've been doing over the last about year and a half has put us in position to be able to provide that too. So we're really excited about it too, and just being able to respond in a quick way. And obviously foster, I think, like adoption of the vast standards and stuff too globally will really help make those calls possible to actually have information to be able to call these APIs too. So really, really excited about it too. Feels like we're just scratching the surface here too. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's already a backlog for enhancements and feature changes for the ACIF Validation API. Martin, uh, where do you see the validation API really aiding in wider adoption of ACIF?
I think it's got, with the brands, the agencies, the advertisers, the SSPs, all having, all coming on board and adopting this standard will be huge for the industry to kind of, adopt that kind of standardization, merging all the ad registries together. Making sure we have this kind of one standard where everything's efficiently managed and tracked is hugely beneficial. What Jason showed you is the kind of there's no authentication around those calls that he showed you, because obviously that's just a light touch of what he wanted to show you. But obviously there will be authentication to ensure users can only access, authorized users can only access certain metadata that we provide, so everything's secure. And by leveraging the assigned clock number, the API facilitates the retrieval of this, once again, this detailed metadata, which I think is really beneficial to the industry, to the global industry, and trying to bring more of these ad registries on board, and all the different entities to ensure we have kind of these standards, because as we all know, we do struggle with standards in the industry, in the global industry, where everyone is doing their own thing, which doesn't help. And I think one of the other things is just this API. It streamlines the process for validation of ads, and this improvement in workflow and measurement is really great. And I just like to echo what Mohammed and Jason said. It's very exciting, and we Clearcast is really buzzing to be part of this initiative moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. You brought up some very good points there, Martin, particularly about how registries will have different metadata available, as well as certain metadata is only going to be available after authentication. So with your 3 registries, what's going to be available now at the launch, and when are you guys going to be launching full validation API functionality?
I think to begin with, Clearcast will be looking at kind of launching with a minimum data set. So just to launch with the validation component, the yes no, this clock number is registered with the Clearcast system. And then moving forward, we would then be looking at adding some of the key metadata. So the key metadata that's useful for the brands, the SSPs, and all the different stakeholders that are finding value in the system. Probably the clock number, the advertiser, the brand, the product category is something that's really useful. And then we would look to incorporate as the system then becomes more adopted and a standard system around the world. We would look to bring in more subscription based kind of tiered data models, so we can then provide more of our compliance data. So the kind of restrictions and presentations around content, because as the compliance of ads is really critical in this industry, and with the likes of Mohammed from ARPP and all that compliance data, it's critical to ensure that the right ads get played in the right places at the right times and to the right audience, and that's kind of critical to us and the subscribers moving forward.
Okay, Jason, how about with that ID?
Yeah, I think based on what I showed, that's what we're going to be providing. So as Martin mentioned, the simple yes, no, which will be unauthenticated too, so anybody can call that without registering. So saying yes, no, this ad ID exists. And then the second piece, the get call, which will require authentication anytime any of the metadata is provided. So it's those 7 pieces of information too. It's like the advertiser, brand, product, the length, the language, the creative type too. So we'll be providing that right out of the gate. So today we do provide that, and to Martin's point, we'll have additional levels because there's quite a bit of metadata that we capture at Ad ID with each creative type too. But being able to share that based on subscription stuff, that we're still in discussions internally how we do that, but still requiring the authentication mechanism helps us in terms of knowing who's using the data too. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to be looking to adding in more data as possible as more use cases come about. Muhammad, how about at ARPP? What's the timeline and what will be available?
So the timeline, as I told you during the introduction, so we're analyzing this global overhaul of the REST API of the identification system called ID Crea that will replace the Pub ID, the Turing system, and it will be launched in June 2025. And so following this launch, we'll create a specific endpoint for the ACIF Validation API that will be open for the actors that need to validate the identifier, if it exists or not, what are the metadata. So we have, as Jason said and Martin, we have different level. We may not need to be authenticated to know if yes or no the identification exists, but we will need to be authenticated for getting the minimum set of metadata that are the mandatory ones. So I think that, as described in the spec, the advertiser, the product or the brand, the duration of the language will be exposed by the API, and like ClearCross, and also at ID we have other metadata such as the clearance information, and these information are reserved to our members, sales house, publishers, agencies that need to know if the ad is compliant or not, according to the service, the publisher, and so on. So it will depend on the actor that will call us. Following this launch in June, we will also deploy, which is really important, a writing API that will help third parties to automatically and dynamically register their creative and generate the ideas from their own system. So we can imagine a DSP that will dynamically, automatically create, registering his ads and create the ideas. So we'll have also this writing API that will be deployed that will help the ad registration.
Okay, great. And yeah, we're looking forward to that. Mohammed, as Jason mentioned earlier, there was a question about, who would be making these API requests and when. So, and now it's basically throughout the entire supply chain, there's a possibility of each component making, needing to validate an ID. Where in the workflow do you expect, or are you expecting to see these API calls come from?
For the workflows, we're making a distinction between the creative registration and the ID validation. Both, as I told, both will be done through APIs. So first, the creative registration must be done as upstream as possible on the demand side, agencies, media agencies, advertisers, and their DSPs. So registration of creation will be done via writing API, and it also can be done manually through a user interface if needed. The major technical challenge that we faced was to automate the creative recognition in such a way as not to generate an identifier for a creative that has been already registered. So for this, we met this challenge by integrating a web service called Signature, generating a fingerprint. So a fingerprint is compared with a fingerprint database, and if there is a match, we don't register the creative because the creative already exists in the system. We just return its identifier. That will be on the registration side. Concerning the validation API, this can be done, we think, at several levels of workflow instances, depends on the use case. When the programmatic campaign is triggered on a DSP, it will be possible to validate the identifier directly from the DSP platform. And if the identifier is known, of course, if it is not known, we can use the fingerprint system and we will return the ID if all created if necessary. In this way, the validation API can return information that can be integrated in the appropriate universal ad ID VAS tag. But we think also that the validation can also be carried out on the SSP side or any services on the publisher side, sales house, if the ID is missing. Ultimately, validation can be triggered depending on the use case. This can be done by the organization also in charge of the audience measurement. We have in France Médiamétrie that works on that, or by reporting tools after campaigns have been triggered that can also validate the IDs. So we think that on the workflow, to the whole value chain, the calls can be made by different actors depending on the use cases. So we can imagine calls at different points in the value chain. We think that the most important is to make it simple as simple as possible. So that's it.
Okay, Jason, Martin, does that match up with your expectations, or is there anything slightly different where you're expecting ad request or validation API requests to come in differently?
I think probably echoing what Mohammed says, it kind of depends on the user, whether you're an agency, a publisher, or SSP. It could happen at different points. I would say there's value in that API call happening once the technical compliance checks have been completed by in our system, because obviously those ads are not, if they haven't gone through the tech compliance checks, then in theory they're not. That ad is not it's not, in theory, it's not validated. So we just need to work on that, and how and where at which stage that gets exposed in the system. And yeah, I'd say it can happen at any stage, really. I said there's a lot of value, even if they're taking metadata at the early stages, which is your advertiser, your category, etc. But going right to the end point where we've done the final approval on the compliance on the clock number, would be kind of right at the end of the chain. So it could happen at all the different supply chain points, really, from our side.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think where we've seen it is like ad tech partners. So we talk about DSPs, but also like trafficking systems like the Media Oceans and stuff too, being able to connect into this. If an agency user is typing in an ad ID or get something from a system, they can easily go and call this too. That's something. One of our goals at Ad ID is to get people out of our platform, in the sense of they're creating codes. Like we have another API that allows the creation, much the same way Mohammed was talking about too. And I'm sure, Martin, you all have that too. But like doing that, staying within the workflow that our users are accustomed to, that they're used to living in, that's really important for us. And I think, ACIF helps do that in terms of being able to easily integrate, much easier to integrate, instead of like 3, 4, or 5 different integrations that you have to do. It's very straightforward with this too. But yeah, much the same way, with my programmatic background, it's like there's a bunch of different links where we do this. And what's nice about it is it absolutely can be called from anywhere, which is nice too, and not overly complex on being able to make those calls. So, yeah.
As far as those calls, from any one of the entities within the supply chain, I'm sure the expectation is that, an entity will make a call for an ID once and then cache that information, as opposed to making that call anytime that ID comes within their system. Is that accurate?
It can depend. We have different guidance for our clients, because there's some information that can be modified within an ad ID. So speaking on the ad ID standpoint too, being able to push other information. So we do recommend doing a refresh. From our perspective, it doesn't hurt to go and refresh it. We'll see clients doing that. Like they'll cache, to your point. There's several clients that cache, others that do it dynamically, so they have the most up-to-date information too. So it just really depends on the use case on it. But from our perspective, it's like, give us a call to ensure that you get the most up-to-date info.
Okay, great. Any other comments from the panelists before we jump into some questions? All